Hello friends, this is my latest planted tank. Now this one is 3 months old. This one is 5 feet long tank. So today I'm going to do a little bit long video, but I will explain all the steps how I did this tank from the beginning. Substrate preparation, sand and soil, all natural things. I didn't use aquarium soil for this tank, only natural soil and natural sand, and how to prepare wood and filtration system, the purpose of using CO2, and the DIY light which I used to grow this tank, and the waste, the small tricks which I used to control algae. Those are the things steps I'm going to explain in this video. I've used natural rocks for this tank, but if you don't have natural rocks for your tank, uh, you can do cement and reform mix rock for your tank, so that also I have included for this video. If you are not a subscriber of my channel, please click the subscribe button and also the bell icon to get my notifications about my new Here I have collected all the material, rocks and wood, and I have prepared the basic layout of the tank. Then it is easy to uh, design the tank. Then you don't need to suddenly find the rock or wood which you know need to get the your design in your mind. So a basic design layout arrangement you can do. This is some wood. Before do the tank, I have to sterilize, and these are you can see these wood plotting. So if I use them as it is, uh, it will plot and the juice inside of the wood will release into the water. Then the water will discolor into a brown color. So I'm going to boil it. It's a small food, so no need to boil for several hours, maybe 1 to 1.5 enough. But if you have large logs, you have to spend maybe 2 3 hours. Now you can see woods are sinking in the water. So this is the main secret. If you have a plotting wood, if you want to sink it in the water, the best thing is boil it. Otherwise, you have to keep sometimes in the water for several months to get this result. You can see the color of the water, it is now brown color. That because juice inside the logs of woods release into the water when it boils. If you don't do this, your tank color will be brown. That will remain for few months until release all the juice inside the wood to the water. Now the woods are ready uh, for the substrate. For the top layer, I'm going to use sand. I have done a separate video, the same thing, the way to use sand, river sand for aquarium. The same thing is doing here. Normally, the sand contain mud. You have to remove it. Always wash it several times until complete remove the mud. And sand or natural soil can bring algae and parasite or bacteria or anything into the tank. So to avoid all those things, after wash the sand, you can pour some boiled water onto the sand and keep for several hours, or you can boil it to kill all the germs in the sand. If you use aquarium soil, you don't get these issues, but uh, you have to use a proper quality aquarium soil. Otherwise, it will dissolve with the time. Then it also create big issues with the time. You can use 100% sand also for a planted tank, but in that case you have to sometimes you better to use root tabs as the fertilizer. I normally use natural soil for the bottom layer, and for the top layer I use river sand. See the quality of the sand now. The water is clear, no mud. Now this is perfect for the aquarium. Now I have filled the tank base with soil. This is natural soil and sand mix, but don't add too much compost because it will create algae issues because the too much nutrition if you include it to the substrate, then the initial stage plant can't absorb all those things. Then those fertilizer will use algae to grow. So when you use natural soil, you will get some issues if you don't sterilize it. You have to boil it. No need to put. You have to heat it, put into a barrel or something, and heat it. Normally 45 minutes or 1 hour time. No need to add water when you heat it. Just heat it. Steam also you can use, but if your tank is big, then it is not practical. For a small tank, you can use the steam also to sterilize the soil. Now I have arranged the base. Bottom layer of the substrate is done with soil. Now I'm going to cover it with the sand. you cannot use only soil because when it is all in the water, some dust will come out. It will affect to the color of the water. So you have to use a sand layer for the top layer. Press it properly to have a compact substrate. If you are going to plant plants on substrate, the height of the substrate, thickness of the substrate should be at least minimum 1.5 inches. Better to have more than 2 inches. Then the plant can develop roots in the substrate. Now the hardscape is done. This is the design. For this tank, I have used a inbuilt filter. This is the filter. I have done a small partition for that. These holes, you can see those are to enter the water into the filter. Then there is a small chamber in the filter to fill the water. When it fill or flow to the filter media. As the filter media, I have used some ceramic balls and some sponge seeds. Water enter through the from filter media to this pump area, and the pump fill up the water from filter to the outside. This circulation will continuously happen when the pump suck the water from the filter. The water from the tank will enter to the filter, and again pump will pump the water into the tank. This filter is very cheap and very effective. If you use a canister filter, it is very expensive, but canister is the best one. This is the light system. I did this with using some LED strips. You can see it's a very bright light. I have used 2 rows, otherwise it is difficult to focus for foreground and background plants if I use only 1 row. You can see how bright it is. These types of LED strips available in the market, eBay or Amazon, also very cheap, $1 or $2 per 3 feet long strip. This is the strip. You have to supply a DC current for this strip. There are plus and minus mark on the light strip. This is a cool white light. I have used this light for all my tanks. It is very cheap and very successful. But you can't grow red plants with this light. I mean, you cannot get the colors. For that, you have to additionally use some color strips, blue and red. Other colors are not very important. Better to use the light with the plastic casing. Aluminium casing also available, but short circuit issues can happen with that. But you don't get such issues with the plastic casing. I have had some cooling fans also for this light system because I want to keep the temperature around 29, 20, around 27. That will help to healthy growth of moss, bird varieties. Mm, Many of the plants prefer that temperature. If the temperature is too high, uh, especially plants such as mosses and fern varieties, who say plants will not difficult to have get a healthy growth. So I use small cooling fans for to avoid that issue. If the temperature of your area, your country uh, low, then you don't need to worry about this. And I have attached these light strips with casings to aluminum box bar to have a frigid finish and to have a nice look. You have to properly seal the joints and both ends of the light casing to prevent any water leakage into the light. Then you can use this light for many years. This is my DC power supply, 10 ampere one, 12 volt. I use the same light strip for all these tanks. Now the tank is completed with the light, substrate, wood, and plants as well. For the ground, I'm going to plant Phogostomon helperi and Japonica, but so far I don't have enough stock to do that. This is my CO2 system, pressurized CO2, 2 kg cylinder. This is the solenoid valve. There are two gauges. One is to indicate the pressure of the CO2 cylinder, and other is to measure the pressure of the CO2 output. The light, you can see there is a light blinking, that is the solenoid valve. When you supply the power to the solenoid valve is open and release CO2 from the cylinder to the aquarium. This one has two output. You can have multiple outputs if you can connect multiple output to the valve like this. You can use same cylinder for a few planter tanks. CO2 is a very important thing for a planter tank because we all know to happen photosynthesis, CO2 and sunlight is required. So we provide a similar light source to the sunlight artificial light for the tank, and if we provide CO2, then the photosynthesis will happen properly. Some plants like valleys, crypto albias, most of the Canadoros varieties you can grow without supplying artificial additional CO2 supply. But the other plants like Rotala varieties, Ludwigia varieties, uh, basically mainly coupling plants, need additional CO2 supply because the CO2 available in the water is not enough to have a proper photosynthesis. When you provide CO2, the photosynthesis will happen properly, then plant will produce more oxygen that is good for fish as well, and plant can absorb more nutrients from the tank, the substrate, and from the water. So then that will cause to reduce the growth of the algae because the level of nutrition in the tank, mainly in the water, if it is go down, then the chances to grow algae will reduce. Then if you have algae eaters in your tank, algae eaters can easily eat small algae patches. Uh, Sometimes you may have seen there are very thick algae layers on glasses and rock and substrate. But when you provide the CO2, uh, the chances to grow very thick algae layers will reduce because plant can absorb more nutrients from the water. Then it will be easy to algae eaters to remove algae in the tank. Sometimes very thick layers even algae eaters can't remove. If you have very thick algae layers on the glass, on wood or rock, you can use hydrogen peroxide. You can spray. Better to use 3% hydrogen peroxide, but don't spray on moss or very sensitive plants. Then, if you especially spray hydrogen peroxide on moss, it will die very soon. I have mainly used tetra varieties for this tank. They don't harm to the plants and don't do any uh, harm to the substrate as well. So they are always my first selection. And I have few dwarf gourami fish also in this tank and also two angelfish. If you don't have natural rocks to your tank, you can make your own rock using styrofoam sheets and cement and sand. Uh, you can connect styrofoam sheets as per according to your requirement to get the your desired shape. You can connect form pieces with the use of nails or some glue also you can use. It's very easy to cut the required design on styrofoam sheets. That is the major advantage when you use a styrofoam for this to make basic structure. Now the structure is completed. Now I'm going to apply cement on this structure. For that I use cement and coloring, that is black cement. You can use any color. I just apply cement paste on the styrofoam. For this you can use a brush. After apply the cement paste, you have to keep it for a few days to completely solidify. You can see this is this is one rigid object. You cannot see any styrofoam piece. Now it is a complete block, but the bottom side still not covered with cement. So now I'm going to do that. Also, the density of this rock is not so far enough to sink in the water. So I'm going to do a little bit thick base for this. For that I use some nails. Then nails and cement will make a good bond. So the base will properly attach with this cement rock. For, for this I use cement and sand mix. But previously I only use cement liquid actually. Cement and water mix. This is the base. Now I'm going to place the rock on the base. Any kind of rock design you can do with this method. You can use different colors. Better to use natural colors actually, black or green. Keep it to dry for a few days. Then you will have a artificially made aquarium rock. Now it is very heavy. It will sink in the water. But if you use natural rock for the same volume, the weight on the glass will be very high compared to this one. The inside of this rock is styrofoam, hence the density is much less compared to natural rock. So that is about the entire process, all the steps to do a planter tank. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you.